This is the subcommittee known as the Finance Committee of the Hoyo City Council. Our scheduled meeting for January 10th. My name is Joe McGivern for the record. I chair the committee. To my left is Kevin Jourdain, member of the committee. To my right is Peter Tallman, a member of the committee. To my far right is Will Playwell, member of the committee. And Juan Anderson Burgos, member of the committee, is to our far left. It is a five-person committee member. We are hybrid this evening, meaning that we could have other city councilors, including Jenny Rivera, on Zoom, and Israel Rivera on Zoom. And at the moment, I believe that's the other two city councilors who have joined the meeting. We're expecting a few more before the night's up. This is a live broadcast being recorded, both on the public access channel, Zoom, and we are streamed. For purposes of this evening, we have a short but important and agenda. We got two items that we're going to take up. We can do them as a package, or we can do them separately, but the same person is here to discuss them. The chair would entertain a motion for item 1 and 2.
So moved.
Motion to take items 1 and 2 off the table?
Motion made and seconded to take item 2 off the table to discuss as a package. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? The reason they go together is our chief assessor, Deborah Burnell, is with us this evening to answer. 1 is a transfer request, which we'll vote on separately, and 2 is an order sponsored by Councilor Jourdain, which, let me read both of them real quick. The transfer is from the assessor's line item, $5,000, into the assessment update, $5,000. Item number 2, that the assessors appear before the city council to discuss the current property tax exemption amounts and qualifying criteria to see if any adjustments can be made to ensure all deserving residents who should qualify for assistance get assistance. We also want to make sure that we are strategically taking advantage of state subsidized exemptions for financial support of our needy residents, especially as the city has to continue to increase property tax to record levels. This is hitting many people hard, and they need our help, our assistance. So if we could, Deb, we'd like to invite you in. I think for tonight's purposes, please come in and, if you're comfortable, come on in and grab a seat. I know you know how to work the microphone. And welcome. And I think first time as chief assessor, if I'm right.
That's correct.
Right. Well, good to see you again.
Welcome.
Item 1 is a transfer. If you could tell us why there's a surplus in the line item, where it's coming from, and why you need to put it into the assessment update.
The money needs to go into assessment update to pay our invoices that we did not have enough money to pay. Our budget was cut at the beginning of the year, so it left us a little short. We wanted to maybe raise an appropriate, but when Tony vacated his position and I moved into his, we realized we had the money left in my position to pay these invoices. One was for our RDM software consulting, which helped do our bills through Munis, and the other one is from Mayflower Valuations, which helped us with our final tax file and final work for the state to get us certified. And that's for $4,000 for Mayflower Valuation, and our Munis help was $1,275. I also need to pay our third assessor, Maureen Cronin, her annual stipend of $1,000. So I have some money left in my account, but not enough, so we requested the $5,000.
Okay. I heard you, but just so it's clear, the position assessor was your former position. It is now vacant. When the city council fills that position, which we will there be enough line item left to get you through the rest of the year for the person that takes over?
There should be, because it seems like it may be a while between, we haven't even posted the position yet, so by the time we get it posted and find a viable candidate, it could be a while.
And the $1,000 for the third assessor, which line item does that come out of?
That comes out of assessment update as well.
That's interesting. I know Tanya, Dojic, our auditor, is with us, so we'll be asking you that question in a second, Tanya.
Okay.
But can you explain to everybody what the two invoices that you have, what these outside vendors do for the city, for the assessors, and what the actual update is?
Mayflower Valuations is our consultant regarding property valuations. And they work with us on property valuations and certain issues and with all of our certification work that needs to be done for the state in order for us to obtain our certification.
And the amount for that invoice is how much?
$4,060.
And how long have you been using Mayflower?
Many years. I don't know exactly how many, but at least 5.
Okay. The committee have any questions for our chief assessor?
No, I make a motion, item 1, turn my microphone on. I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that item 1 be approved.
I'll second that.
A motion has been made and seconded to adopt item 1, approving the transfer. Both, I'm sorry. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair hears unanimous, 5-0. Transfer is recommended. That will, of course, go to the full city council next Tuesday. Item number 2 is the order by Councilor Jourdain on the update. Deb, I spoke to you this afternoon, just to see where we were, and I spoke to Councilor Jourdain. Do you want to give us your response to this order, and then we can assess where we are, no pun intended?
Sure. The property tax exemptions we have available to our residents that are homeowners are Clause 22 exemptions, which are for disabled veterans, and the amount they receive depends on the percentage of their disability. Disability has to be at 10% or greater, and they can receive up to $400 or up to the full amount of the tax bill, depending on what Veteran Services allows them to receive.
Does the state reimburse for any of that?
Yes.
Okay.
We get reimbursed a percentage of the $400. It's at a set amount. I was going to talk about that at the end. I'll bring it up right now. Every clause of exemption we have does get reimbursed by the state,
Okay.
not at the full amount.
Right,
So we do get some money back.
right.
It doesn't come back to us at the assessor's office, but it goes to the city.
Right. I think we get it back on the cherry sheet, I believe, yeah.
And we fill out the form, it's called an MDM1. We fill it out every year at the end of the exemption period so that we can claim that money from the state so we can get the refund.
Right, right.
Next, we have the Clause 17D, which is for seniors and surviving spouses. There is no income limit on this clause, but the residents must meet an asset guideline of $40,000 or less in order to qualify, and the exemption amount is $175.
Excluding their home.
Yes, excludes their home. Next would be 37A, blind persons. All blind persons that are homeowners having a certificate of legal blindness from the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind can receive an exemption of up to $500. And our largest one is our Clause 41C, which is elderly persons being age 67 or older and meeting income and asset limits. The exemption amount, I forgot to write that on there, is $750. All persons applying for exemptions must meet the eligibility requirements as of July 1 of the tax year. And the only clause we have room to expand on is Clause 41C. We can adopt to make a change to that. We can change age, income, and asset limits usually, and we already have taken advantage of that in the past. Original Clause 41C was adopted in 1986, and it had an age requirement of 70 years of age, income and asset guidelines were 13,000 for single residents or 15,000 for married. Your assets had to be less than 28,000 single or 30,000 married, and you could receive $500. In 2011, the City Council adopted to change the requirements of Clause 41C to better meet the needs of our elderly homeowners. What had happened when we changed from 41 in 1986, the state set us at the limit we had at that point. We had 259 applicants. And when we changed to 41C in 1986, after that, in the 90s, 1995, it kept going. We kept getting less and less applicants. I do think the change for getting less applicants were people were getting more savvy about their home ownership and changing it out of their single names into other names, adding their kids to it, which made them not eligible for the exemption clause anymore. But it protects their home, which is a better option for them. But needless to say, we did change it then. We dropped the age from 70 to 67, and we maximized the income and asset guidelines. Instead of just going up a couple thousand, we went right to the top. We went 20,000 single, 30,000 married for income, and 40,000 single and 55 married for assets. And we raised the limit to $750. And that's where it's remained since 2011. The only thing we can change on Clause 41C, if you wanted to review that, would be to change the age and the exemption amount. We can drop the age to 65. We can't go lower than that. And we can bring the exemption amount that they get up to $1,000. We are capped, though, at reimbursement from the state at $500 per person. We can't capture extra money because we're allowed 259 of them. We're still getting $500 a person. When we adopted the 750, the city had to absorb the rest of the 250 difference. And if we go to the 1,000, we'll be absorbing the 500 per person difference. So that would be possibly an increase in our overlay to cover that. But it will help the seniors. Right now, we had 48 applicants for Clause 41C last year.
Is the cap on everything or just 41C?
That is the cap on 41C.
Okay. I'm going to recognize the maker of the order, Councilor Jourdain, then Councilor Tomlin.
Well, Debbie, thank you, number one, for doing this homework. I really appreciate it. And I remember, and this was warmly, I had filed this 11 years ago now, so that was when we made the change in 2011. And I know it was universally supported by all the counselors at the time to review this. It's too bad, despite 11 years, that the legislature hasn't gone up on the income and asset limits, so we're pretty much still where we're at with those. But maybe that's something Representative Duffy can file for us to review those, because, you know, the cost of living and inflation and everything is continuing to go up. We had the age 70, we went down to 67. The key to the ball game here is to maximize our 259 exemptions, if we could do it. Because we get 100% reimbursement up to the $500 for 259 of these. So it's free money to our residents. And it's too bad that only 50 people, say, are taking advantage of it.
Well, there's more that apply.
Okay.
I'd say there's another 30 that apply that don't get approved.
That don't get approved.
Because their income is higher.
Okay. So we have 50 that are basically getting it approximately.
Correct.
Okay.
And we do advertise it. It is on the back of your bill.
Okay.
It is on our webpage about the exemptions. And we do work sometimes with the Council on Aging. We always have a flyer there so that seniors know it. And they help them process applications and everything there too.
Well, and I see the mayor's here, so maybe we can really hype this up, because 200 households could take advantage of this potentially. And this is, again, all free money from the state. We would get 100% reimbursed to the $500 amount. And we chose, because of the hardship that property taxes can serve on people that are needy, like these folks. And to meet these income and asset requirements, you obviously have to be needy.
Yeah.
So we went to the 750. First thing I would say that would be a no-brainer for the city council is to lower the age limit in light of the 50 down to 65, because the more people we can get, the better. That's free money, right? So I think we should definitely go to 65. Number two, we should consider going to the $1,000. That would come out of our pocket. Perhaps the better approach would be we go to the 65. I'm interested in your opinion or anybody's opinion, but at a minimum, we go to the 65 and we really advertise the heck out of this thing, and try and see if we can't get better than the 50 people. Because I gotta believe there's gotta be more people that qualify that just either aren't hearing about it or what. And because I'm sure other counselors are hearing like I do about, they groan from
Right.
residents whenever they get, like this past week, the property tax bills went out, and those were whoppers, because the home values are really going up, and when you're on fixed income and your property taxes are going up, especially folks with these kind of minimum incomes and minimum assets, this is really a belt tightening type of thing. And I myself would be open to going to the $1,000. Again, considering counselors, and I would say to my colleagues, $250 times, even if we had everybody, if we had 250 that took it, you're not talking about a lot of money, and it would go to the people who are the poorest folks in the community that could really stay in their homes, who are really getting hit hard on these property. And quite frankly, and I think you would agree, Deb, that where we're going with all this is property values are going to be probably based on sales continuing to go up over the next couple of years again, perhaps.
Yes.
Until we hit some sort of bubble, and I see Aaron's here, who's a realtor who knows this very well. This is likely the trajectory for the next couple of years, for sure. And that could really be the difference between paying for medication or food or these other things and being able to pay property tax. I was almost stunned when I was talking to one particular resident who said that, their property tax bill was around $4,000, but they only had about $12,000 to $13,000 a year coming in Social Security income. So for someone like that, almost a third of their total income is coming to City Hall in property tax. That was staggering.
I hope they apply. I hope they already get it.
Yeah, exactly. Those type of folks do need to apply. So anyways, I will certainly recommend the 65, but I would even be open to the 1,000, even though that extra 250 would come out of our pocket. And then let's try and really advertise this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Tomlin?
Yeah, I agree with Counselor Jourdain. I would definitely go to the 65 and then take a look at it, depending on how much it would cost the city. I think we have to be careful with that, but if it's helping our low-income residents and our elders, and I do think that, getting it out there, a lot of people aren't aware of a lot of the, programs that we have with the assessors, and I'm sure some people do it every year. It's just automatic. They can do that, but I think it's something to look at, and if it's not too costly, I would be open, either keeping it to 750 or possibly going up to the 1,000 exemption, but I think definitely we should to lower the age to 65 to try to get more people involved.
If you all acted on it and did that sometime soon before spring, we could get it
How about
into
tonight?
place
How about-
to begin fiscal year 2023 on July 1st.
I think we plan on doing it tonight
We gotta-
for next week's meeting, right?
There you go, we can
Okay.
file an order.
So,
right? Yeah.
well, we have the order right here.
Yeah.
We should just do it, yeah.
Counselor Anderson Burgos?
I know some of the discussion we're having is that we don't have enough elderly residents coming to us applying. And I was thinking, well, I'm pretty sure every single elderly resident that lives in the city of Hoyo gets a Hoyo gas and electric bill. So I'm wondering if maybe communication, hey, did you know? And that way it can up the numbers and applications. I'm just trying to find a way to get this news out there.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
We used to do that. We used to put a flyer in the gas and electric bills many years ago.
Maybe we should start that again, hopefully. It'll work.
Could
We
you
can certainly
ask,
do that.
could you ask them? Because that's that's a good suggestion.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Chair, entertain a motion?
Okay, motion that the order has been complied with in terms of getting us the information, and I'd like to make a motion hand in hand with it to lower the age to 65 for the 41C exemptions.
Second.
Motion has been made. A motion has been made and seconded that this order has been complied with the amendment in addition to it, that we recommend that the age limit for 41C
Yes, sir.
be reduced to
65.
65.
And if you could maybe study
I
the,
may have a conflict of interest here.
you wouldn't meet the income and asset,
Yeah.
though. You're all set, don't worry.
Yeah. All right, on that motion, is there any further discussion? Jeff, you got that?
I did indeed.
Thank you. I wasn't doubting it, but I just want to make sure. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Debbie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Debbie.
Have a good
Take care,
evening.
Deb.
Thank you.
I'm going to read item number 3. We have a number of special guests with us this evening, but I'm going to read it into the record first, and then we'll get going. Introduced under the chair of the Finance Committee's name, which we understand is the way our mayor introduces a financial item before the city council. The order is that the sum of $475,000 is appropriate to pay the cost of a new middle school design phase and the payment of all costs incidental resulted thereto, and that to meet the appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 7 of the general laws, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the city therefore. That the mayor is authorized to contract for and expend any state aid available for the project, and that the mayor is authorized to take any other necessary action or convenient to carry out this project further ordered. That any premium received by the city upon the sale of the bonds or notes approved by this vote, less than such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of the cost approved by the vote in accordance with Section 20 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such a cost like this amount. Further order, that the treasurer is authorized to file in an application to qualify under Chapter 44A of the general laws, and of all bonds and or notes authorized to be issued pursuant to this order, and to provide such information and to execute such documents as may be required for such purposes. In further order, that in order to reduce the interest cost, the city treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to refinance any outstanding bonds of the city, as well as any bonds issued pursuant to this order, and in connection therewith, to issue refunding bonds in accordance to Chapter 44, Section 21A of the general laws. Finally, that there shall be no change in the purpose of this bond authorization without prior approval of the Hoyo City Council. That final note goes towards the intent of what the bonding is for, which I think we all know, but we're going to hear from in 1 second. I read that language because that language is given to us by bond counsel, approved by our auditor, looked upon by the mayor, this body, and the city as important to understand, because a lot can take place after the vote by the full city council, whether it's next Tuesday or a future meeting coming up soon. This a note, just table setting. This is about the feasibility design stage, which we know a school building committee has been meeting for some time, working with our superintendent, working with probably a couple of mayors by now, but working with the city, working with the needs, working with the design, working with the location, doing a lot of things and making some decisions, which we're going to hear this evening. We have with us the mayor of the city of Hoyo, Joshua Garcia, who is also chair of the school committee by being mayor. Our superintendent, Anthony Soto, who is our superintendent / because the state has made him the permanent receiver. The vice chair of the school building committee, which is our school committee person, Aaron Burnell. And I believe David Yost is also a member of the school building committee, if I remember correctly. We welcome all of you for this evening, and thank you. By design, what we'd like to have is, and I've seen presentations, I think most people have seen presentations of the school building committee, but we'd like to have our superintendent, make a presentation. Aaron, I'm sure you're going to chime in with Anthony as to what the committee has done and where we are. And then we want, of course, to hear from our mayor and talk about some things. I'm sure there's going to be questions. The focus of this request is the design feasibility study phase of a project that is round 2, I guess some people are going to say, but it's really standing on its own. And we just need to know if and I think most of us understand the need for school building construction and school building improvements very well. To go forward, we need to adopt this to allow the funding to be in place, to allow the MSBA, which we're going to hear a timeline in a second, to recognize that the city wants to go forward. The chair peripheral vision is not good, but we are joined by Councilor Bacon. I saw a little movement over there. And we still have online with us Councilor Jenny Rivera and Councilor Israel Rivera. Thank you. I talk too much. Anthony, Mayor, Aaron, David, you all want to come in. There's plenty of desks. If you're comfortable where you are, that's fine. But if you're going to be speaking, come on in. And David, please, come on in. Yeah. David, just be careful with the screens. They're very loud, and you don't want to sit in front of them.
Sorry.
No.
Thank you again and welcome. Anthony, did you want to start with the presentation?
Yeah, I was hoping, I'm not sure if Mr. Anderson Burgos,
I
you
emailed
received-
it to him this afternoon.
okay.
Do you need screen sharing, is that what you're asking?
Is he on?
He is, he can hear you.
Okay.
And we can hear him in a second.
I'm just curious, if he can share the presentation, I'm gonna kick off by just passing it off to Aaron Brunel, who's gonna start us off. But first, I wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules. Hope everyone had a great holiday and took an opportunity to get some time off. But now back to some important business. We've been doing a lot of work around this middle school project, and we're ready to come forward and just get to a point in the process where the MSBA will, there's certain steps that we have to go through for the MSBA to move us from the eligibility period of the process to feasibility. And one of them is securing a vote authorization from the city council.
I don't have internet. Can I use your computer?
Sure.
Thanks. I'll pass it back to you.
And with those opening remarks, Jeff, are we in a position to share?
I don't believe that I received a presentation.
I sent it to you, but I sent it to your personal email because that's what I had. Sorry.
Okay, was it Yahoo or Gmail?
What did he say? I'm sorry.
Yahoo
Was it
or,
Yahoo or?
Aaron, do you have it in front of you where you could share it?
Yes.
If
I mean,
we
I can
zoom-
share it, I'm not sure which email you sent it to.
Okay, or if we can let Aaron Burnell,
me
you'll
one
make her a co-host, allow her to share it?
Oh, I would need to sign into Zoom to do that, right?
Okay, I thought you guys,
I have internet now, so we're good. Hold on. So you want me to sign into the Zoom call so you can share my screen?
if Jeff can't find it, yeah.
Here,
Or
I'll.
maybe, how about email it to his city one, then he would have it.
Yeah, I will. Now that we're here, now I can get it from him. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine, you're fine. Zoom isn't bad, but, and Zoom hybrid is my problem. Yeah.
Well,
And while we're waiting, Councilor Anderson Burgos came up with this idea that we're going to start selling advertising on Channel 15 when we have these meetings. So this is a good time to go to ads.
If you're 65 or over, apply for your senior exemption.
There you go. Ad number 1.
what email should I forward it to?
I found it, so let me
Okay.
just get it up real quick.
Okay. Sorry about that, Jeff.
No worries.
Say, I know I sent it.
There you go.
That would be good. Absolutely. Oh, really? Okay, that would be cool.
That'd be good, yeah.
Hey.
Well, I'll just start off by saying, so the presentation we're going to present to you tonight is fairly similar to the presentation we presented to the joint school committee and city council when they had us in just a few weeks ago. Just a couple slight edits and some updates towards the end that we've, stuff that we've progressed since then. So I'll wait for Jeff to get that pulled up to start officially. But as you guys know, a little background. Oh, there we go. All right, so our agenda for you this evening is to go over the purpose for this meeting as Councilor McGivern has outlined so eloquently already. We're going to provide you a little bit of background on the project and go over the MSBA process. As mentioned, we're meeting tonight to discuss how to fund our eligibility process. And then the school building committee, vote authorization, funding appropriation, and next steps. So again, the purpose is to understand the order, yeah? Are we not on the right one?
I don't think he's caught up yet. So, we are on slide 3.
I was not looking over there. Okay, there we go. Okay, so to build understanding in order to secure the city council support for vote authorization and the funding commitment by April 29th. That date holds significance with the MSBA's schedule of their meetings. A little bit of the background, as most of the people in the city and a lot of people on the city council are familiar, we did attempt to go through this process a few years ago. So in November 2019, unfortunately, we failed the debt exclusion vote to fund 2 middle schools. In January 2020, the MSBA directed Hoyo to apply again for a new statement of interest. In spring 2020, the City Council approved the MSBA submitting a statement of interest for 1 middle school building of 550 students. In the fall of 2020, the MSBA indicated that Hoyo needs to show a united alignment with clear financing plan. So following that, in April of this year, well, not this year now, sorry, it's 2022. In April of 21, the City Council issued a resolution to show continued support for the statement of interest. And then in June of 2021, the MSBA voted to advance Hoyo's statement of interest project. We are very lucky that the MSBA decided to invite us into this process again. In August of 2021 through April of 2022 is that eligibility period. And then in fall 2026, with everything going according to our schedule and plan, would be the earliest that a new school could open. The city of Hoyo can afford 1 new middle school. The answer to that is yes. February 2021 analysis by Hinder and Hilltop Security showed that with the capital projects coming off, the city could issue a 30-year bond in 2024 at a 4.5 interest rate and maintain the same level of debt, which is $4.8 million, that it has currently. This drops by $0.2 million if the Chestnuts, that should actually come out. The committee has moved forward with choosing the Peck location, so the Chestnut Street site is no longer an option. The debt schedule forecast, if bonding for a new middle school, Peck in 2024. And then bond anticipation notes, municipal purposes loan, February of 2021. Anthony, were you taking over at 6?
Sure. I just wanted, this is just a visual that outlines the MSBA process. We are in that second box from the top. We are in the eligibility period. So we've been invited into the eligibility period, and where there's a dollar sign, that's where we would have to come to city council to seek a funding appropriation. So you could see that the first step is during the eligibility period, we need to seek an appropriation from the city council for funding of the feasibility study. And then the next time we have to come back to the council for funding would be once the schematic design and the feasibility study's been approved, that as part of that process, they put together a budget, and then we'll have a total budget of what the project's estimated to cost. And then at that point, they require that we go to the city council and get another funding appropriation to show that the city's going to bond for the full project. And then every time there's a star in this diagram is when the board has to take a vote. So you can see that they've already taken a vote to invite us in, that first star. And then they vote more along the way during the MSBA process. You can see our timeline here. So this is a nice little timeline that helps guide the process of major milestones. And this is just a timeline during the eligibility period, which is where we're at right now. You can see that we've completed most of the steps in the eligibility period. So the next step that currently is under review is the enrollment certification. We have submitted that to the MSBA. And the next step is for them to set up to meet with us on January 28th to review those enrollment projections and then certify them. Once they do that, that step will be done. And then by April 29th, we have to have a vote from the city council to fund the feasibility study agreement, which is what we're here today to hopefully garner support from the finance subcommittee. We do have a school building committee. We have been meeting since September. It was put together by then interim Mayor Murphy, and more recently, Josh Garcia did add a couple of members to the committee. There's 16 members in the committee, 7 of which are Hoyo Public School alumni, and 12 committee members who are either grandparents or parents of current HPS children. And this is just a list of the people that are on the committee. We also have non-voting members on the committee to work in subgroups during the application process. When interim Mayor Murphy was reviewing applications, there were people that had expressed interest in being a part of the committee. So we do have some members that are non-voting members that participate regularly in meetings and that are assigned to sub-work groups as needed. So in the slide deck, we also included the vote language that would be put in front of the city council. I don't want to read this word for word unless you want me to, but this is so MSBA has a template of what the language has to be for the vote on funding, and we would just put, our school building committee, we would put Holyoke and insert the dollar amount that we're looking to appropriate. And that's the official language that they require as part of the process. I would, slide 13. So what does a feasibility study cost? The last time we did a feasibility study, it started off at an estimated $800,000. And when the building committee decided to explore 2 sites, that added $390,000. So the feasibility study at the time was about $1.19 million, of which 80% was reimbursed by the MSBA. Now this changes, right? That was that was a few years ago. What we have done, Amherst, I guess, is another community where you can see like the last feasibility study that they did for one of their buildings was about $750,000. So I think it's safe to say that a feasibility study, if starting from scratch, can range anywhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million in costs. Normally, those costs are reimbursed by the MSBA, but since we just went through the process and it went to a failed vote, this time around, the MSBA is not reimbursing for the feasibility study. So one of the things that we, as a building committee, explored was if we use the same OPM and the same designer that we used, considering that this work just happened a couple of years ago, and all of the information is very much still relevant. Is there an opportunity to save the city money funding for a feasibility study? And we did. We did reach out to our previous OPM and our previous designers, and we asked them, if we were to leverage a lot of the work that you guys already did and you were selected as the OPM and designer, would that decrease our cost for the feasibility study that we're estimating of $800 or $1.2 million? And they went back on December 2nd, and they said yes, it would. And they submitted a proposal to us that said that if they were selected, and they were able to reuse a lot of the work that was already completed from a couple of years ago, that they feel the cost of the feasibility study would be for up to $475,000. So we did get an opinion from our chief procurement officer, Lori Belanger, on whether or not we can use the same OPM and designer. She wrote a letter which was submitted to the city council that yes, we could use that same OPM and designer. And so what we're here today to do is try to get that $475,000, which represents which uses the assumption that we can use the same OPM and designer that we used the last time around, and that they can leverage a lot of the work that they already did. And that was the next slide.
Can you add me to the list for questions?
Then the slide after that is just a quick timeline on voting. So we recognized that we wanted to get in front of the city council as soon as we could. So we went to the joint city council school committee meeting a few weeks ago, and it was brought up that we should bring this to the finance subcommittee. So here we are. But the bottom line is that by April 29th, if we want to be invited into the next phase of this process, so like, I know we're having a lot of conversations about specifics of the project, like, where and how much, but like, at the end of the day, we do not move forward with this project if the MSBA doesn't invite us into the feasibility study phase. My sense is that if we do get this vote, we show that there's funding available, they will ultimately invite us in. We'll find out in June if that's the case. But, that is a step that needs to happen. So we've done everything that the MSBA expects us to do. The next step is for the city council to set aside, to vote to approve bonding for up to $475,000, and then we can show the MSBA proof that has happened, and then they'll meet with their board and make a decision as to whether or not they invite us into the next phase of this process, which will then mean we get an OPM. And there's other steps where we move from eligibility phase to feasibility study phase. And I believe that's really the core of the presentation. We do have a slide in there that talks about how people can get involved. We have some information on, when our school building committee meetings are, and, information on if anybody wants to volunteer to serve on any of the working groups, there's contact information there. But, Mayor, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, I think you covered a lot of the core elements behind the process here, but just to add here that certainly we and the committee were looking at alternative options to help defray that cost as much as possible. But the goal here is to secure the vote of the 475 so that MSBA can do their vote and let us go in the next phase of this process, while we continue to do what we can to do our best to defray that cost. One of which Alicia and I are working together on is, like, for example, using half of that, covering half of that using community development block grants, for example, among other options we're exploring. So although we're voting or potentially looking for that authorization, just know that I don't anticipate using or going to borrow for the full 475.
Thank you, Mayor. And the reason I read the full language, which is standard language, was just because of that, because the 475 is where we need to be to tell the MSBA we're serious. But in all likelihood, we heard the mayor said the steps are being taken to make sure we can do the 475 with other sources, which means it's less to borrow and less interest to pay. Before, I have two questions. I'm going to turn it over to get some speaks. Everybody good with the presentation?
Yep.
David, they do a good job?
There we go. Yeah, if I could just add, very good this savings by being able to reuse the previous plans.
Yes.
But just to point out, they did study 2 locations, and we haven't. I don't know if we've got a lot of public input so far, and I think very important that we get the public to buy into this. I think that was, looking at the bigger picture, it was one of the shortcomings last time, it just sprung on people at the last moment. So I think we really need to, get people in on the decision-making process, as far as citing and so forth.
It's a point well taken, and nothing's off the table because we eventually have to get not just this vote, but the full bond, down the road, which is, I think a lot of stuff will be discussed. I think it might be part of tonight's discussion, but not necessarily the vote on the feasibility study phase, but it depends. With us, we have our city treasurer, Katie Jakowski. She's one of the connections to, it's Hilltop Securities, but our bond counsel, as we all know, is still Cinder McNary, I hope. She only started with the city of Hoyo in 1975, way before I was here, Aaron. But she is the best, and the work she's done for the city is incredible. Also, as always at the Finance Committee, with us on Zoom is our auditor, Tanya Dorjak, and we welcome both of you. They're here for obvious reasons. Ladies, if you want to speak or jump in, just raise your hand, and you'll be recognized. If we have questions, we'll certainly recognize and ask our questions to you. Just so I have it straight, when I make the report to the full city council, Anthony, do we know a number about what the projected enrollment's going to be for the middle school? Rough.
550 students.
Okay, and I think you clarified 429 is the absolute deadline. I think our vote should be before that if we can get all our questions and concerns and everything out and answered. And other than that, I had one question. I'm not even, this is minor, Anthony, but on that MSBA flow chart that you did, the money tonight, this particular feasibility bonding phase,
Yes.
The second one is the final project. You put the detailed design after the vote. Wouldn't the detailed design have to be before the city council votes on the final?
So after the schematic design and feasibility study, they put together, as part of that process, you get a budget of what the total
Right.
cost of the project is gonna be, that we would have to, then get a vote from the council to fund. I'm not sure what,
But we'll
I do
know.
see that there's a detailed design after that,
There are
yeah, the
contingencies
detailed
and
design
changes
would
that
not
could take
impact the
place, but
budget.
we're gonna know the location, the size of the school,
Yeah.
and all the, whatever details the city council wants to know.
Right.
By the time we get to our second,
Correct.
second vote, not this one, but the second one.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. All right,
Mr.
First-
McGivern, if I may?
Yes.
So I just wanted to point out, so even though April 29th is the deadline, it's the building committee's goal that we could have this voted on by the end of January 31st, by the end of this month, so that way it can be brought up during the MSBA's March 2nd meeting. That would be our wish, if
okay,
possible.
I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't realize they were meeting in March too.
Yeah, so that's what's referenced on slide 15, that's what that schedule references.
Okay.
So if you guys could vote on it by the end of January, it would go in their March 2nd meeting. If it wasn't till, by March 28th, it would go on their April 27th meeting. And if it wasn't till April 29th, it wouldn't be heard until their June 22nd meeting.
Okay.
So that's what that slide.
And I did attend the joint committee, which this presentation was made. I think it was even a little bit more detailed, but it was joint being city council and school committee. And I did watch, I think the school building committee met another time after that meeting, because I learned some things on a video that which is available on our website. Or just when you're surfing, you can just go to channel 15 and pick it up.
And we meet again this Thursday as well, if anyone's interested.
All right, I'm going to recognize, and well, first I want to tell, on Zoom, we were joined by Jose Maldonado Velez, City Councilor. And we also have some other guests, and I know they're not just here for this item, but we welcome you all. Councilor Jourdain, questions, answers, discussion.
Wonderful, thank you. I have five areas I'd like to plumb into if I could on this item. The first one is relative to the 475 price. We're calling this a feasibility study, but it's actually neither. It's neither feasible nor a study because we've already know exactly what we want and we know exactly where we want it. And we've already got schematics and pictures and everything that we want. So nothing has changed about the PEC project, isn't that correct?
We still have to, they still have, this is a new project, so the old project is out the window. They still have to do a feasibility study.
What has changed about the
The old project failed.
No, I understand that the public voted it down, but in terms of the material deliverables from the contractor to us, what has changed in any material manner?
I think construction costs for sure.
I understand, but that's
And
not
rates.
relevant to the feasibility study because they're here to design a proposal, theoretically in a feasibility study. What that means is, for folks, you know, of course, what it means, but for people observing this meeting, that means we're gonna spend $500,000, or in the case of the first time, $1.2 million, to decide, should we do this or should we not? Is this feasible? What would it take to do this? And if we were to do it, this is what we're suggesting be done, okay? We're not at that stage. We're already this is a fait accompli. We've already made the decision that this is gonna be done, and we're simply following a pro forma process here to make it happen, right? I mean, so there's not no third location being contemplated. We have Chestnut Street and we have Peck School, and we're literally have, the building committee through its work has made a decision, we want Peck or whatever, I'm assuming that to be the case because it sounds like that's the case. And that Peck is gonna be the place, and that's our proposal. And so we're gonna take that piece of the two-school solution and use that piece and advance that to the council. Isn't that accurate?
Yeah, I think everything you said so far is accurate.
Okay, good. So,
With the exception of like the 475 for a feasibility study is in fact using the assumption that it's only one site that the designer is going to be looking at.
okay,
If we start introducing other scenarios to the process, the feasibility study costs would increase.
And that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Because if you start, they're bidding on this 475 number on the premise that you're using the old work product. Makes perfect sense. But my point is, like, $500,000 to literally lift what was already completed work and say, here's another $500,000. That doesn't sound like a cheap price to me. That sounds like a hell of a lot of money. Because literally it's change the dates. That's all they're doing on the work product. What deliverables are they providing for 475? Because the work is already done.
Anthony, don't we have the proposal from the designer and the OPED that we could share?
Yeah, I mean, we can share the quote estimate that they provided. It lists like what makes up the 475,000.
Okay. Yeah, if you could share that with the committee, that would be
Is
helpful.
that where like the traffic study would be?
Yeah, so, you know, if anything, you know, if the last time around is any indication of what the cost would be, I could say that about, you know, 35% of that cost is the OPM themselves, and then the rest of it is the designer.
Okay. I think Juan had a question, Mr. Chairman.
Doesn't it also cover the OPM's fee throughout the process, not just for the beginning stage? So the OPM is going to be there kind of managing the project start to finish, and that fee covers their working expense through the process. So the bulk of the savings you're seeing in the initial one from 4 years ago to this is mostly on that designer end, because yes, we are, for the most part, picking up the project. There will be tweaks, conditions have changed. We will be making sure that the old design fits our current educational plan. So there may be some changes, and so the designer will be involved with that process. Also with, of course, adjusting things for inflation. But majority of that goes toward the OPM and then managing us through the process.
Like overseeing the contractors and this type
Yeah,
of
they're
piece?
basically a project manager.
Project manager, okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to see them. But we can definitely forward you their proposal.
Okay. I don't know, I think Juan might have had a quick question he wanted to ask.
Counselor Anderson Burgos?
Yeah.
If we can kind of stay, you know,
I
as we
will.
go along, we're in the same topic.
Yeah, it's definitely the same topic. I think Counselor Jourdain brings up a very good question. It's thoughts that I have had myself, but I believe that question should be addressed and asked to MSBA, just because what I'm hearing is maybe some, like, no, we need concrete answers, and I believe MSBA should be here to provide those answers to you. That way we can move forward.
Okay. If there's a contact there, I'm happy to talk about it. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is some of the, again, what I want to avoid is us spending, whether it's $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, whatever it is, if there's not consensus to do all of this, okay? Because otherwise what happens is this is just another $500,000 that's out the window. And I think many of us are very close to supporting this, okay? And I can only speak for myself. But some of the conditions for me to support the overall project is, one, that it's financially viable for the city to do without an override. That's number one. So I would like to have something in writing from somebody, the mayor, treasurer, the finance team, that says we can fund this school project on current existing finances and bonding. We can bond for the project and afford it without this jeopardizing the city's finances and without a tax override. And by that, what I mean is we're not setting ourselves up for an override down the road, because what I'm concerned about is if we use our liquidity to pay for this without an override, does it become a situation where, okay, 2 years from now, we paid for this, but we just played a shell game with the money, and now we're looking for a police and fire override or a DPW override? so that we got the money. We're not asking for an override for the schools. We're asking for an override to fund police operations, okay? I would need to have something in writing from the finance team and you, Mayor, as the chief executive, that says that's not going to happen if we fund this. So I would like something on that. The other thing, oh, yes, Mr. Soto,
I
I'm
was
sorry.
gonna say, Mayor.
I just wanted to
On
say that, something was provided to the city council, but it was a snapshot in time, February of 2021. That's when Cinder came into the city council. She looked at the debt capacity of the city. And at the time, the appropriation for debt was $4.8 million. And they basically projected out all the debt that's falling off of the city's debt schedule and showed that assuming we had a new building in 2024, that, we would be able to keep the city's $4.8 million appropriation for debt. Now, that was a snapshot in time, Councilor Jourdain. That was something that was on record, submitted to the city council in February of 2021, snapshot in time. Things, there are some things that may have changed since then, but it sounds like you're looking for an updated analysis.
No, it's not really an analysis, because what Cinder provided was to say that you have the liquidity to do it. Sorry. But Cinder, at the end of the day, is not responsible for the financial management of the city. The mayor, the finance leadership team, and us are really responsible for that.
Okay.
And I want a statement from the finance management team that says to the city council, that will not happen. I have no retribution back to Cinder to say, oh, Cinder, you remember in April of 2020, you said we could afford this? That and 50 cents gets me a cup of coffee. She has no fiduciary duty to us on that. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Senior Center.
If I could just interject, because
Sure.
Kevin's making a very good point, because we didn't learn from the first go-around. We know the final vote doesn't come till all is said and done, and if you don't have the votes, it doesn't matter if you have an override, it doesn't matter if you have a vote. You gotta vote that final bond figure, which was not gonna pass, even if the override passed the first time. That is important, what Kevin is saying, but I think part of it is in the resolution that we adopted up front. Part of and if we go back to that, Kev, I think that might help a little bit, but I understand an update is probably what Councilor Jourdain is looking for, and might not be a bad idea. Mayor?
An update on what?
What's that?
An update on what?
An update on, the plan is, we're doing this, it's not gonna need an override, period. Override's not gonna pass.
Yeah, right.
But regardless, I think Kevin's asking that,
But I think that's what I was going to seek clarification on,
Yeah.
Councilor Jourdain, is you mean to come back for an override on something else, whether it's
Well,
something
yes.
for police, something for DPW, something for, so you guys know that it's going to be my objective really to be sure that we're, streamlining what we can and take full advantage of whatever capacity we have to offer services at a cost that's much more efficient. It'd be irresponsible for me to sit here and say, I will never come back and potentially act, because I don't know what's going to happen in the future with our public buildings if there is a need for an override. That's number one. Also, number two, the responsibilities of the buildings that our school children occupy, that's our responsibility. And I just don't know. I can't sit here and confidently say, never mind, let's not do this, knowing that we might have something else somewhere else. So you won't get a letter from me making a promise one way or another, but I can promise you this, that moving forward, we're going to do what we can with the financial team to be sure that we're keeping up with services and finding ways to save money, so that if and when something does happen, that the city of Holyoke is prepared to respond, with the potential of going for an override being like the thing of last resort. If that, but it's
Well-
tough to sit here and give you a strong assurance, not knowing what the future is going to hold, and also knowing that we have a responsibility we need to take care of today. And the other comment too about consensus, there was a strong majority on the school building committee after long and extensive discussions around site, and the school building committee chose to proceed forward with a site. So there's no more discussion one way or another. That's the direction we're going, is the PEC site.
Okay. My point, and I want to come back, 'cause it's a very important point. What some of us are suggesting is that we don't want to shell game the overrides. That, oh, this won't need an override, but because we funded this, we created a liquidity stress on the entire city finances such that we now can't afford to fund the police department, the DPW, the fire department. And then we end up saying, well, we're not going to put the school on an override. We're going to ask the police or fire services for an override. That is distinct and different from, okay, we've decided we want to build a new DPW building, and I want to, bond for that, and I want to ask for an override. That could be, 10 years from now, and nobody's, because the roof collapses, I don't know. Something crazy happens, that's different. But what I'm saying is that we do not create a situation where we drain the liquidity of the city, because then you really can't afford it. And we need to be transparent with the people of the community that we're not shell gaming the money, okay? And just creating another override that might be more popular than this school. I don't know. Maybe police, in the past, the only override I'm aware of that ever passed in Hoyo was for police and fire and DPW trash pickup. That once happened in 1991. That's the only time I'm aware of an override passing in this town. So the other thing I wanted to, so consider that, because I think that's a representation that the public deserves a right to know. The other thing I would ask is, there's been a commitment by the schools to give $500,000 a year to the city to fund this project. Can we get that in writing? Or some sort of agreement between the school, not just a letter from you, Mr. Soto, but something, well, you have the force of law, I suppose, because you're now the receiver, you're the everything, basically, but
Just the superintendent.
well, you have this, you're the all omnipotent one there with all the state powers now. But in terms of some sort of formal agreement between the city and the schools, or the state, or whoever you have to get that approval, it says, we will appropriate for the life of this 20 years, or whatever the bond is, $500,000 a year, so that 10 years from now, and we're halfway through this, somebody can't say, yeah, but times are tough now, and I know that was our commitment then, but we just don't have the 500 grand, and we can't do it, because we got a bond payment, and they're not gonna take a handshake and a smile face from Kevin to pay the bill. They're gonna expect a check. And I want that as protection for the taxpayers of the city. Is the schools willing to do that for us?
Yeah, we did put it in writing, and we even got a approval from Commissioner Riley himself. I believe the first time around, he put in writing that
Super.
the mechanism that we're talking about, which would be through operational savings, because as part of this, getting a new building and consolidating our portfolio, there are operational savings. PEC alone cost over $600,000 to operate in utilities. That's how inefficient that building is. Compared to another, most of our other schools average around 200, 250. PEC's so inefficient, and just closing down PEC and building a new school, you're saving money there. So we already enter into an admin agreement with the city every year, and how we determine the appropriation and what services we pay for. That mechanism is already in place, and if we're realizing savings, we would be able to use that, as well as others that was mentioned in the memo that I sent to the city council. But if that's not good enough, I'd be happy to revisit that and put something else in writing, for sure.
If we could just get something that could be considered binding and not unilaterally retractable, You know, that's the thing that I would be looking for so that
Right.
the city's protected. And then the fourth point is the 80% reimbursement. One of the dilemmas the last time was that the project was beautiful, no doubt, but it came up to about $550 a square foot. And the state was only willing to reimburse 80% on the first, I believe, $260 per square foot. Yeah. So as a result, we never got 80%, and we got 55%, I think is the way it shaked out when it was all said and done with the numbers. And the question is, when this liquidity analysis has been done, are we considering 80%? Are we considering still only the 55%? What was that predicated?
When that analysis was done, it was based on the percentages that ended up being final.
Okay. All right.
So not the, what's called the effective rate. So
Right.
there's the MSBA reimbursement of 80%, but then the effective rate when you look at construction costs over the cap, when the analysis was done by Hilltop Securities in February of '21, it was based on that lower amount, not the 80%.
Okay. And is there any opportunity with SBA or the legislature or the state administration, the governor's administration, that can in any way work on that percentage so we get a higher effective rate? Because to me, for a poor community, the reason we get 80% in the first place is because we're broke. Most communities don't get that high of a reimbursement. And so for us to do better on that would be really important to this project. And, are we really putting a squeeze on our cash flow to only have 55% on this? And what did we figure was the number at this point for one building for the PEC
For the total
cost?
total costs, I believe you had it right. It was above 500 per square feet, but
Yeah.
I don't have the amount in front of me right now, but I can get that.
All right.
I do, to answer your question, no, I'm not aware of any other mechanism that would reduce that other than exploring cheaper costs for construction, right? So there is we're going to be talking about it at Thursday's meeting. There could be an opportunity once we move to the next phase to look at a model school option. So in that process, the state has a set of models. West Springfield High School, for example, is a model school. You could literally go to where they've already built the school using this model school process. You can go visit one of those schools and see what it's going to look like in another community, and then see if it would fit at the PEC site. And they would have to make modifications, but that is an opportunity to reduce costs that we want to explore once we get in. And I think Josh was alluding to.
We were going to surprise you, but we didn't want to share much of that until we brought it forward to school building committee first. I didn't want to make any promises in case the school building committee didn't want to go that direction.
Right.
But yeah, there's the model school option where we get to look at different schools that might fit that spot, different schools around the Commonwealth that we could even visit, look at, touch, and potentially bring down the square foot cost
Would be good.
pretty significantly. One example that was shared.
One in Marlboro, I believe. But I know West Springfield we wouldn't be looking at a high school, model high school, but.
Well, it was just the example that the gentleman from SBA, it was like 400, the Marlboro was it Marlboro that saved 18 million? Because it reduced the square footage cost so much because they went. So apparently it's an option that other districts had implemented, and 100% of them have had a significant cost savings because of it. But again, I wanted to share it with the school building committee and be sure that folks felt confident about that direction before we started to explore it further.
Yeah, because it's not just about meeting the site location and seeing if it fits that. Ultimately, it needs to fit our education plan for Hoyo. So,
right.
that's what this comes down to at the bottom of the day, right? Is creating a building that's going to be suitable for our students, not just in 5 years, but in 25 years and 35 years. So that way we are considering the longevity of the city. I just wanted to point out back on slide 13, it gives you at least the typical projections for a project of this size. And so considering inflation, it's around 61 million is what they're saying on this slide. Again, that's not specific for our school, but that's to give you, at least if you reference slide 13, it'll give you an idea of the average range for construction costs. One of the subcommittees we have on the school building committee is communication. And to your point, Councilor Jourdain, we're basically gonna try to framework all of the communication that goes out, so that way people don't get hung up on that 80% number, because it isn't realistic, right? And I think that's one of the things we ran into last time. And one of the other things too is when people are like, oh, it came so sudden. The school building committee was working on this for a very, very long time before it came up for any votes or any public discussions, within city council. But, excuse me, oh my God, I totally lost my train of thought. What was my point? I'm so sorry. It totally escaped my...
You were talking about it taking, you
the
have been
80%.
working on it for a long
My
time.
point was that the communication subcommittee is going to be working really hard with the new communication director at Hoyo Public Schools to ensure that when we put communication out there, it's clear, so that way we're not coming back questioning, well, why aren't we hitting this? And how come it was said like this when it's really not that? So it's just like, when you're selling something, you have a net sale price. Don't present it as a higher price when it's really not what you're netting. So we're going to be really careful to not even use that term in our communications with how we're discussing everything, just because it is misleading almost. It gives you this false representation because it's only 80% of this smaller number, and it's not possible to hit that smaller number because construction costs just don't meet that. But to the gentleman's point, we're going to be exploring the potential of a model school option, and that would bring the construction costs down because other districts use it as well. So your supply orders are different because you're buying in a larger bulk, sharing supply with other districts and such things like that. So we will be exploring that, but it was just brought to our attention like yesterday.
And we won't need the 475 either.
So Jack, what's his last name? The MSBA.
Jack McCarthy, he's the executive director of the MSBA.
Yeah, so the reason why the MSBA isn't reimbursing our feasibility study now is because our last project failed, basically, right? And they're kind of like, well, why invest in Hoyoke when they didn't fulfill the project? So there is a potential that we may end up being able to get some reimbursement if we choose a model school project, but that's not something for us to know yet. It will be discussed at their next meeting. And then the feasibility study as a whole should be even less expensive if we choose a model project, because there's even less design aspects to it. But those are all just maybes. We don't have the definitive answers for that yet.
So the last point I wanted to make was that this is kind of obviously, it's an important vote, I think we all do, but just because if we don't go forward, we've lost yet another $475,000. And so all this stuff has to be kind of ironed out and figured out for my vote. I can only speak for me, because otherwise, if it's something that I couldn't ultimately support, and I'm close to wanting to support this because I've always been in favor of doing at school, is, I don't want to just throw another 475 out the window. That's real money to us. So I want to make sure that we're really committed to doing this, instead of saying, well, a year from now, well, we lost another $500,000, because if this doesn't get reimbursed, that's all our money. Unlike the first money, at least was only 20% of ours.
So
I'll
when
leave it
you
at
say we're really committed, like, the city council already expressed to the MSBA that they're really committed to doing this. That's.
Yeah, but we're committed to it. That vote of an SOI, it's not a bond vote. The bond vote is one that gets real, and that's the real vote. The SOI is basically, you keep our name in the queue. I mean, I've probably voted for, I don't know how many SOIs over the years, you know. They're nice, but they're non-binding, and they don't,
Yeah.
it's a feel-good vote.
Yeah, I'm talking about the resolution that like, before we were invited into eligibility, the city council went on record and said, we fully support this, we want to move forward, we want to be invited into it.
But you already
to
know
get
you
us
have
to
an
that
entirely
point.
different, almost city council. You have
Yeah.
a new mayor, I mean, you know.
I know, I just, when you say stuff like, if, I don't know that the we'd even be in eligibility if the MSBA heard hesitation like that.
Right, yeah, so we
You
gotta
know,
be.
they didn't hear, like, it was unanimous. Before you submit this, we need to see that you guys are serious about this. And the city council got together and said, yes, we're serious about this.
Well, I think the public referendum should give anybody hesitancy, shouldn't it? I mean, I think the issues that defined that question 2 years ago are ones that we will ensure, or at least I will, are vetted here tonight and throughout this process, because I want to make sure, one, this is something we should do. Two, you have a good plan. Three, we can afford it. Those are always the standard. Back in the old days, all these votes on school stuff were almost a no-brainer because we used to get 90% reimbursement, and we never had, well, the square footage of this, and you had to do like a calculus expression or figure out what your true reimbursement, because the cost of construction in those days was nothing. What happened is the state went to 80 and then went to a fake 80 when the cost of construction went through the roof and they never increased their formula. So then this became, well, this ain't 80 and 90 anymore, it's like 50. So now you're balancing that against what are all the needs of the community. And these are serious votes because they're such huge price tags. Yeah, thank you.
Just a couple of points, if I could. And Anthony, we understand. I think the city council I think this city council, we know that we need to do something with our school building inventory. And the school committee, the school building committee, 2 mayors now have made this, 3 mayors actually, when we go back to the original project, that they want to go the middle school route for good reasons, more about curriculum, more about the middle schools, should have never been separated or should have never been consolidated into the elementary schools. And we also know, and we heard this the last go around, and you and I were talking about this, that there are elementary school buildings out there that need to be taken offline. And that was part of the original proposal. Are there going to be buildings besides Peck that are going to be taken offline?
Yeah, we anticipate at least one building coming offline.
I'm not asking which
result
one.
of this.
I
Yeah,
don't think we
I'm
should
not
say publicly.
ready to-
But that's still part of the savings, like you said,
Yeah,
$600,000
when it was
a
2
Peck.
buildings, we were talking about 2 or 3 buildings coming offline, and when we just did an analysis and looking at 1 building, we would be able to take one of our schools offline and repurpose that facility for whatever it is.
Because any consolidations also means savings in terms of your budget.
Correct, which is how we were, that's part of how we were able to assist with that 500,000.
And again, I think the MSBA got our message, it's clear, I think they're gonna still get a good message from us. But this whole process is backwards, always has been. Nothing to do with the current MSBA, nothing to do with it's the way government works. The final vote, you want to say should be the first vote, but it's not. That's why I asked you about the final design schematics itself. The first go around, and I don't want to rehash it, but I want to say one thing because Kevin's making a good point on this formula. Jack McCarthy sat right where Aaron Burnell is sitting this evening, and he's the one that explained this to us. Because we took a vote on the feasibility vote, and before it was 1 school, and then we took a second vote when we went to 2 schools. Not once did the OMN, did anyone tell us that this formula was in place with the MSBA. We learned about it after those votes. And that's when we said, time out. We'll stop there. Jack McCarthy gave us more insight about what was going on with the MSBA than anything. I have a lot of respect for Mr. McCarthy. I have a lot of respect for the MSBA. But they got the mandate from, at the time, Joe DiNucci, who said the open checkbook has got to stop. You can't just let communities say, here's our project, give us 90%. It makes sense. It went from what made no sense to a ring it in, and this formula was developed. But Kevin's right. The formula 2 years, 3 years ago didn't make sense to a gateway community. Now with the construction costs the way they are, we got to start, before we take the final vote, we got to know what the construction costs are. Can we afford $61 million and still keep the city services that Mayor Garcia has promised to keep across the board? And it's all fair. That's why everything is open for discussion, even though we're just looking at the feasibility study, which I hope we're going to give a very good approval to this, because we need to do something. We needed to do something a while ago. I'll tell you, the school building committee I sat on 15 years ago, we with Whitney Anderson, we went through every building in this city, and there was trouble then, and those buildings are still standing somehow. We've got to do something, and we got to do it for education, for our parents, our grandparents, for our students, and for what we see as the future of this city is education is a big part of breaking the poverty cycle of Hoyoke, economic development, getting people into jobs, and reducing the amount of low-income housing we have in this city, because that's why we get 70%, and Chapter 70 money is actually 80%, is because we do more than our fair share of assisting and working with a low-income population. Go to a bedroom community. You know what I'm talking about. And that's what the MSBA isn't looking at. It's not a fight with them. It's our state legislation and the governor that we have to work with to say, hey, there's got to be changes in this formula. It's not going to predicate my vote as do or die, but that message needs to be continued down there. And I thought by now it would change a little bit. Jack McCarthy's a great guy. He sat right there. The MSBA is doing their job. It's not them. They're doing what they have to do, what they're mandated to do. But their changes could be made.
Could I make a point to that? I couldn't agree with you more that, I think we all agree that there should be better funding mechanisms. And I just want us to keep in mind that that's not really our fight in this room with this vote and this project, right? We can all advocate with our state representatives and within our legislature to try to improve that process, but we're not going to be able to improve that process within our current time frame and the current project we're trying to accomplish. So while I couldn't agree with you more, I just don't want us to overly focus on something that we can't change in the immediate future. We can all, as a city, as citizens, as voters, advocate for that and pressure the legislation in every avenue that we can to try to get that changed. But unfortunately, we're stuck working within the parameters that we're working within for this current project. And, I've never lived anywhere in my life, and I think it's really sad that I live in a city that I constantly feel like puts its students last. Education is the foundation to everything. That's how we improve our crime rates. That's how we improve our poverty rates. That's how we see less open storefronts because we're graduating more educated people. Dean Technical High School is seeing a revival. We have a wait list now. We're bringing students back. The school committee is doing so much work this year and working with the commissioner to try to regain local control of our schools. It's time that this city puts its dollars into its students. We fund the least amount in the entire Commonwealth, I believe, for net school spending. We need to do better, and I understand that we need to make sure we can afford it, but how many bonds does this city vote on? And how many times you're like, well, if we bond for this, we got to make sure we don't have to bond for something in 15 years. To the point of the tax override, when's the last time the city had a successful tax override? You have a new mayor who's financially conscious. You have plenty of people in the city that are financially conscious, but we have to find a way to make this work this time. The MSBA is not going to keep inviting us in if we keep saying no at the end of the day. We're doing all we can to make the project as affordable as possible, but this city needs to invest in its youth, and the time is now. So I just wanted to say that.
And well said. I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that, Aaron. 1991 is the answer to your question. Okay. And that's still, that eventually ended up being a little less than $5 million. Menu questions are blackmail, according to Mayor Hamilton.
And I believe
But
the overrides
the money
that
goes
passed
in-
were all but education, if I'm not mistaken.
It does, but within 6 months, it just becomes part of the general pot. It doesn't matter. The menu is a choice, but it's a preference of what you ask the voters to give. It's not, it does not mandate those dollars. Eventually, they just become part of the tax levy itself.
Can I add one point?
The one thing about, I'm done. I think the MSBA is doing their job. I'm ready to support it, ready to say we want to do our job. The only problem in net school spending is we have the lowest per capita income of the entire Commonwealth. We've gone above net school spending how many times in the last 5 years, Mr. Superintendent? Last 10 years.
We've been at or below, we've been right around net school.
Right around
spending,
net
yeah.
school spending, okay?
Yeah.
But I can tell you, I can find at least 2 years that despite our income level, we've gone above net school spending. And you know, it's a moving target, and you know what I'm saying. You know, at the end of the year, it's not what it was at the beginning of the year. But, Councilor Jordan,
Yeah, I want to just observe, again, respect what people are saying, but at the same point, the notion that the people of this community are not paying enough taxes is not lost on me, for sure. We have the highest residential tax burden in the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That is the amount of taxes that people pay divided by the average income. People here are paying an inordinate amount of taxes. I know even on myself and my own home, my taxes in the last 8 years have gone up $3,000 per year. So I'm still waiting whenever I hear people say it's only $20 a month. Do the math on that. It's not $20 a month. It's much, much more. And we also have the highest commercial tax rates in the Massachusetts as well. So, but seemingly, despite the fact that we keep paying more and more in taxes, we seem to be slipping off into the abyss financially. And yet today are still propped up by these one-time monies that we're getting from the federal government. But for that, we haven't had free cash in the last 2 years, and but for the $1.7 million that we called lost revenue, and some of the shell gaming that goes on with the money, we would be in unbelievably unbearable conditions financially here as a city. So assured that there's plenty of money that is being paid. As I gave the example before, Hoyo was founded as a town in 1850. The tax levy in 1999 was $28 million. Today it's now $59 million. It's gone up more in taxes in the last 20 years than we went up in the first 150 years. So people are doing their fair share, that's for sure. What we do to spend it and how fiduciarily responsible we are with it, that's another subject. So the state needs to come through with the money. I mean, they're the ones that have these high needs and do not come through with the dollars for the operations of the school department or in all of these type of things. The property tax-based system is not the people or the elected officials' fault of this community. The property tax-based system does not work for poor communities like us because why? We have high exempt property, we have high needs for government services as a function of the actual real income of the residents that live here, such that suburbia has less needs they have less needs in their budgets, but yet generate more because their homes are worth more. So this whole system is a setup job, and it's not the elected officials' fault of this community. Like somehow we don't value education. In fact, the budget, I remember since education reform quadrupled, I believe, since when I took office here. So the amount of money, but yet seemingly, I've also watched student enrollment go from when I started here at 7,700 students has now gone down unbelievably, the number of students. So people are also voting with their feet out of the schools too, which is a whole nother subject. But We're paying plenty of taxes, that's for sure. And the question is, what are we doing with those taxes? But the state is not doing its fair share. That's, in my opinion, yes, they're the people that have set us up for failure. And they set up Springfield too, except they handed them a casino that pays about $35 million in a host community agreement. So that's kind of one of their ways. Or when they put them under a control board, they forgave about half the money that they let Springfield borrow. That was another gift to Springfield. Holyoke's still waiting for our gift, okay? We haven't received such a gift. So anyways, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I can't believe the president put both of us on the same committee because we each talk too much.
I know.
Let's move this around. Councilor Playo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to Councilor Jordan's point, I think he brought up a lot of very, very valid points. And I wanted to piggyback on them. And if I say something that's inaccurate, please feel free to, jump in and interrupt. But I think that the projections that were provided don't account for any future bonding, for any future projects that we may want to account for. And I think that's pretty important, right? Like Councilor Jordan stated, if there's something if the roof goes out at the DPW or something, we're not going to be able to, we don't know if we can afford it because it's not accounted for in the projections. Well, as an example, if something else, whatever other projects are, it'd be nice to have something with projections with future bonding, so that we know exactly, right?
I mean, it was a snapshot in time, so.
Yeah, snapshot.
You could do a projection every year. Things
So,
change.
moving on to the $500,000 letter, I think the point with that was that it wasn't binding. So if we get out of receivership and we get a new receiver, or if you decide to move on to bigger and better things,
You guys kicked me out of here.
well, we wouldn't do that. I don't think we'd do that,
You
right?
don't have to worry about that.
On the record, I don't think we'd do that.
The only way I believe.
But I don't think it's binding. So if anything happens, as far as if you leave or if we're out of receivership and a new receiver comes in and he decides that he wants to stop contributing that $500,000, there's nothing to say that he doesn't have to. So I think that's the issue with the non-binding that we keep bringing up, the $500,000. And then the other point that Councilor Jordan brought up was why it costs so much. And just so everybody understands, on record, I've asked these questions. I'm on the school building committee, in case nobody else knew. I see Dave, he's the chair of the sub-finance committee. And we've asked these questions, and the answer that we get is we don't know. And I think we've heard that a couple times here tonight is I don't know, we don't know. So do we need to do a traffic study if we go down to a new property? We don't know. Do we need to do a new site survey? We don't know. And these are things that add money to the cost. And we're not sure what those things are. And we bring it up at the meetings and we don't get it. And by the way, we've met like 5 times, I think. We've met 5 times, 6 times for a multi-million-dollar decision, which is something that I've said we should be meeting a lot more often for. And if we look at the next agenda, one of the items on there is, hey, I think maybe we need to discuss if we need to meet more often. So it's funny that it's being taken into account a little bit late into this. So the chestnut vote was something that was brought up, and I think we all want a new school building for our schools. We all know the value of education. I remember walking to McHugh to learn English, because Spanish was my first language, and I remember walking to McHugh in knee-deep snow with my little nylon mesh backpack. So I think we all know and understand the value of education. We all want to do what's right for our students, but we have to do it right, and there needs to be a balance. And I think when we talk about the Chestnut site and we talk about that area, I think it's really important. I've been really disappointed to hear that conversation is done and over with, because I don't think respectfully that it is. And I hope that my colleagues on the council consider that, because that's a very, very important argument. And we talk about a vote that we had on the school building committee. And, in my opinion, I'm not very happy with the vote. If we look at the makeup of the school building committee, and it's something that I know we need to talk about at our upcoming meeting on the 13th, a lot of it is school administration. It's all school admin. So if we have a principal at STEM that votes in favor of building a new middle school, well, wait a minute. If we have a school administrator that's responsible for the upkeep that's complaining that it's too much work to upkeep the building, well, wait a minute, he's going to vote on the demolition of this building? I don't know about that. And I understand that certain positions need to be on there because it's a state mandate or a state requirement, but I think that, and to Aaron Brunel's point, as far as the communication committee goes, I think that we could do a lot better job of reaching out to people and making sure that we're adding parents on this committee, making sure that we're adding people that have a genuine interest in making sure that the right site is chosen and that this entire process is done properly. And at this point, being on the committee, I don't feel like that's been done. And again, I point to the makeup of the committee. It's majority of school admin. It's school admin. So I'd point out to my colleagues, I think that's really, really important moving forward. And one of the motions that I was going to make after was I think this should be tabled, because again, there's a lot of information that hasn't been presented yet. There's a lot of information that's missing, and I think if I misunderstood, the deadline for this isn't until April, right?
I don't think you misunderstood. So we have to have a vote for funding for a feasibility study submitted to the MSBA by April.
Yeah, so I think we have plenty of time to figure out if we can find the answers to this, maybe rehash the chestnut debate, maybe add some more community members to this decision, maybe with kids, parents or whatever, and have some of those conversations.
If I may. So with all due respect, Councilor Puelo, and I can appreciate your opinion, the site location was debated heavily at a meeting and voted on by the committee as a whole, and not only voted on by a 2/3 majority to approve the PEC location. So while I empathize with you not wanting that location, the committee diligently discussed and voted on. Not only that, it took up a motion to table and bring up another discussion, and that failed, and it was rediscussed. So it was discussed, and it was voted on.
Well, I disagree.
Excuse me, I'm speaking, so if you don't mind. I understand that some people won't like that decision, but that's the decision that was made. As far as the makeup of the committee goes, the MSBA gives the mayor a list of positions that have to be filled. Mayor Murphy at the time created the makeup of the of the committee. At the last committee meeting, we discussed some of the holes in the makeup, and Mayor Garcia appointed a few new people to move up into voting roles.
Thank you.
Requesting parents has been put out in the Hoyo Public Schools update weekly. You can't force people to get involved that don't want to get involved because you may or may not like the makeup of the committee.
So, Mr. Chairman, so I appreciate the passionate argument, but the fact remains that these are still facts, right? We know what the makeup of the committee is. We know the communication. There hasn't been a single person to show up for public comment, so it's true that maybe people aren't as interested in it, but I'm not going to go and say that it's the people's fault that they're not involved, because every person that I've talked to about this issue says to me, I think the school should be built at the Chestnut site, and I think my colleagues should really consider that. And I know for a fact that there's constituents that aren't happy about it, because I wouldn't be here talking about it and arguing for this if it weren't a legitimate issue.
But Mr. Puelo, you're arguing in the wrong space.
Excuse me.
Order, please. Thank you, Councilor Bacon.
So, I mean, again, these are legitimate points, and I would argue them for my colleagues to consider them. I mean, if there's information that we don't know about, if there's things that are missing, the appropriate thing would be to table them until A, we can figure out what the answers are as far as what we're paying for, and two, give the public another opportunity to be able to debate this Chestnut site. Because I know that there's a lot of people in the community that are really interested about the site location, and it's very, very important that we make sure we get it right this time.
Points well taken from everybody. Look, the table question will come up this evening. It's an option of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We will certainly have that option, but we need to get to how many questions are there that need to be answered and where we are. And, Aaron, you're absolutely right. But if you lose 2 votes, you need 9, you're down to 11. So we got to keep this in perspective of we're all trying to get to that common ground. We need a new school. And we got to make sure it's affordable. We got to make sure it's the right site. Problem with that site, well, now I'm going into the back and forth. I'll answer that in a minute. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have 3 comments, and they're all in different arenas. One is I wanted to comment on the makeup of the school building committee. And that was something that I had filed an order on weeks after the override failed, because it was felt that one of the key issues was that there was not adequate community-wide representation on the building committee. So I was just interested to understand, and I did hear that we have 7 public school administrators and 12 parents or grandparents that are responsible for the children in the schools. And so my question, just to understand the process, was how the participation on these meetings has been. And if these parents and grandparents have been actively involved in the discussions, the debate, and the votes. Because I do think that the point made about communication was very important. But I think more importantly is, has there been the participation? So that when we're having this conversation, it's a broader conversation than, pretty much the type of people that are sitting in the room tonight. So that's just, I'm not expecting that you have the answers tonight, but that was a concern in the last go-around from a process point of view. My other points are, the best news I heard tonight was the model school option. That is the newest and best news I've heard about this project since we started talking about it. So I am very excited by that, and I'm very, very happy to hear that it's something that we can take a serious look at, both from the effectiveness of an educational approach that's being already implemented in other places, and particularly because it's a win-win on the cost side. So to me, that seems like a win-win, possibly. I'm not saying definitely, but I mean, we can't be, we are different, certainly each community is unique, but as humans, we have more in common than we have different, even though we tend to focus on the differences more. So I just find that a very exciting and encouraging opportunity that I hope we take full look and advantage of as we're going forward. And the only other thing I'll throw in, since I was accurately, in this case, described in the Republican newspaper as a financial conservative on the Hoyo City Council, I am hoping that as we go forward with whatever cost savings are being looked at, with the contribution that would be coming from the school with the consolidation, would please, first and foremost, be getting out from underneath paying rent for administrative offices.
Oh, we have some
I hope
people
that's
on that one.
I hope that's on like the top hit list. That's just my little thing. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the updates. And I go to a lot of meetings, but I can't go to every meeting. So I appreciate these updates.
We'll update you.
Thank you.
Counselor Tomlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've had some great points. I'll just interject a few things here tonight. And Councilor Jourdain brought up some great things about the cost and the square footage, and the 50%, 55% might be 65%. And that's important to find out what is going to cost per square foot and what is the state reimbursed. And that's really important. And Aaron, you had great points about we got to invest in our children, invest in our buildings. When's the last time we built a new school? Was it Dean? Was it, 1990 or whatever it was?
It was
1990?
Dean, yeah.
But we do have to look at the cost. And we got to look at is it affordable down the road? And we borrow the money now, 20 years, 10 years down the road, now all of a sudden something else comes up. And we got to look at that. You stated that the letter of interest, that letter about, paying something back to the city. I think that's crucial. Can the school say, we're going to save $500,000 a year, we're taking a building offline in expenses and cost of running the school department. And I think let people know that it's not actually an amount that like a check we're going to send to the city. I think it's a savings that I want the public to understand that it's not like the school department's going to write us a check for $500,000. So now we're not paying $4.8 million, we're paying $4.3 million. So that cost is still going to be there. And as the time goes on, I'd like to know more about the school buildup. Where are you going to put the students? Last time we had 550 and 550 in 2 schools. Now you got 550 in 1 school. What happens to the other kids and where they go? And then, it's almost like, seems like, is it fair to, how are they going to do that? A brand-new school in 2026, and there's other students that are in a school that's 30, 40 years old, and I think that's important. But the school building, I'd love to see that, the school, the market, the new schools you said, at the model school, I think that's a big savings that could be to the city. And looking at that Mayberry or Marlboro or West Springfield to see how the city can save some money, by the square footage, and I think that's important too, because, we gotta look to the future. What's gonna happen in 20 years? And who's gonna be here? A lot of us won't be here in 20 years. Who's gonna pay that cost, and is it affordable at that time? So, I think there definitely needs some more discussion, on this, and, I know that the MSBA wants us to be part of this, and they invited us, and we're at this next phase, and I think it has to happen. I don't know if it's gonna happen tonight, but we have a timeline. And I want to know what the timeline is tonight. Could we vote it in February, in our February meeting?
I can answer that for you. So the ultimate timeline, deadline, is we need to let them know by April 29th. So that's part of why we wanted to get in front of you so early, because of course there's going to be questions and concerns and things to work out,
Right.
which gives us some time to hopefully, come back and whenever you meet again, later this month, early February. So yes, sir, there is time. The ultimate deadline is April 29th. So of course, any time ahead that we can add to the time frames, great. If we can get it done that prior month to make their prior monthly meeting, wonderful. But the deadline is April 29th, so that the MSBA will vote on their June meeting. I think it's also important to note, we need this vote in advance of their meeting, but ultimately they could still decide to not proceed with us. So though you're voting to give us the money, there is still no actual guarantee that we end up going through everything.
Right, and that was my other question, because technically you could say, yeah, we're going to go February or March, and we're going to approve this feasibility study, but they could say, well, we looked at everything, we looked at other projects, and we don't think this is the right thing at this time, so it just won't happen. There won't be a loss of any money, it just won't happen.
Yeah, and then to
Yep.
your other point about like the education and the students, so the school committee just had a retreat. And so the school committee is going to be working towards a middle school model, whether we decide to build a new school or not. So we're going to be in the next few years, looking at who's in what building, redistricting, coming up with a new plan of what grades are in which school. One thing we did decide is to go with the 6 to 8 model. That was one of the questions that the middle school study team, which I'm also a member of, couldn't come to a conclusive decision on a recommendation. And the superintendent wanted the school committee to be able to have say on that. So we have pretty much come to the decision that we'll be going 6 to 8 when we do transition to middle schools. As far as exactly what students will go in which school is yet to be determined based on which programming we decide to enter which building. And some of that may depend on the eventuality of the site location. Peck location has some commonalities that play with the high school and various things like that. I'm sure Anthony can add to that.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And I just say, I want to say, some of the questions you have, that's what we're here for, right? We'd like answers to some of those questions too, which is part of the feasibility study, like, what's this gonna cost? We don't know until we do a feasibility study. You wanna know what a model school costs? We're not there yet. Unless we're invited into the next phase of the process, and we're able to work with the OPM to say, hey, look at that design, look at the model school design, work with designers to say, all right, let's see if this model school would work. Here's some tweaks we need to make for the PEC site. I can't give you what the costs are gonna be for a model school. I can't give you what the costs are gonna be even for, if we moved forward with the existing design, because we're not there yet. We can tell you what all those things were 2 years ago, and we can, which we've done in the past, we can say, okay, this is what it was 2 years ago, and here's escalation, and this is what we think it could be. That's in the slide deck that we just prepared on slide 13. But unless we move to the next phase of the process, which is feasibility, which will answer a lot of those questions that we do have here tonight. And that's what we're hoping to get to. We're hoping to get to a point where some of those, where we could conduct the feasibility study and get really solid on like what the costs are gonna be.
Okay, thank you. I'm all set.
All set. Thank you, Counselor Tomlin, thank you. Jeff, while you're with us, I'm seeing nobody, no city councilors online at this point in time. Have any questions? Just want to make sure I'm reading laptop number 1 correctly.
Any hands up? Yeah.
There are
Anybody's
no
hands
hands
up?
raised.
Okay, that's what I see, but I just want to make sure. Thank you. And the point of this meeting this evening was to get all this out in the open. Everybody's been transparent, and I appreciate that. A lot of good comments. No one's right, no one's completely wrong. You know, this is how it works. We got to get somewhere where we send the right message to the MSBA, satisfy what the students, what the parents of this city need. Location is part of it. I don't disagree with Will. The problem with Chestnut Street is, one, our agreement with the housing authority, who owns most of the land there, has gone by. And two, it adds a cost to it. And I don't know, I'm not saying it's not doable. I'm just saying we have to talk about the cost. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add that I actually spoke with Director Mainville over at Housing Authority, and he said he'd be willing to give up the site. And yeah, that's it. They'd be willing to give up the site.
The questions that were asked this evening, if everybody's done with questions, I think, for round one, can we just summarize them and then maybe set up a meeting so we can get some responses to the questions? Okay. Kevin, I know it starts.
Want me to go through mine again?
It just briefly.
Yeah. I won't, I will not get into the commentary around the questions, but just what the questions are. I asked for there to be a statement from the chief executive and from the financial leadership team relative to the fact that reasonable assurances to the city council that there will not be, that there is sufficient liquidity to pay for this bond if we were to do it. And number two, that this should not result, by funding this and bonding for this, will not have jeopardize the city finances such that there would cause there to be an override for something else. I think that's, I don't think that's much to ask. The second question was, I'd like to have from the receiver assurances that we have something legally binding on behalf of the city for the $500,000 per year commitment for the life of the bond from either himself or the state, and that either the law department or whatever, something be put in place that this, because, you know, it's going to be here for quite a number of years, that the city has protected our interest. And then I'd like, the new question that came up actually after I spoke was, I'd like to learn more about this model school option and what that means. Is the 475 needed now, not needed? We could get reimbursed for that. What does that mean to the cost? I'd like to learn more about that. So those were my 3 question areas. Thank you.
Go ahead, Anthony. We're not expecting answers tonight.
No, I know. Here's my fear. Like, we don't know about this model school option. The board is, the MSBA has to go to their board first, which is happening in March, to see if, you know, they can make some exceptions and move us in that direction and provide us with that flexibility, knowing that, you know, they are asking for like an exception for Holyoke to be able to do that. So like, my fear is that we won't know about whether or not we can use that as an option until we hear back from the MSBA, which is not going to be until later in March. So that just puts a strain on the timeline.
Can you at least couch it that, totally understand what you're saying. You don't have a commitment of a yes for that. But if it were to be yes, this is what would happen. So if you could at least give us what it is and what would be the benefits of it for us, understanding you would not have the capacity to say, I can guarantee this.
And
Potential of the cost savings.
Yeah, like what is it all about? Like what does it really entail? What would it mean for the cost savings? Does it mean on the 475 and all of that? Yeah.
I can tell you, I spoke with Mr. Sheehan, who chaired it last time, and I asked him why they didn't choose a model school last time, and he said with the 2-school model, one of the locations was gonna have a health center, and one of the locations was gonna have something else more community-based, that the
parent
model
center.
school just didn't fit what the goal of the committee was at the time. So I can talk to him more and see if he has a little bit more clarity and information about what those differences could have been, so at least we can reflect if we can't project.
Now, Aaron, is the building committee, your building committee, going to review this and start to kick the tires on it to see if you guys are warm to the idea of
Yep,
doing
so
it?
it's being added to our agenda for our Thursday meeting. As I said, there was meetings with Jack just on Friday and today, so this just came
Right,
about
right.
to us. Basically, he said, why aren't we looking at it? And we're like, we will. So yes, it's on the, more or less, so it's on the agenda for Thursday.
Okay,
for
so
us to
maybe in
start.
another 2 weeks, you would have more information on like how the committee's general thoughts on it, perhaps? Or-
Yeah, but it's just gonna be hard, because I don't know how much information we're gonna have to be
Okay.
able to present to the body, to be able to get an idea of whether or not it even works for our education plan yet.
Okay.
To know whether or not it's something that we should heavily consider, right? Because even though it may save money, we have to still make sure it fits the educational goals for the district. So
Yeah.
it's just, we won't be definitively discussing it.
Aaron, your mic is out.
I'm sorry, thank you. We won't be definitively discussing it, because again, we just don't have enough information to, but we're going to be putting it out there as a new topic to look into and see how we feel about it with the information that we'll have at the point.
I actually did have one fourth question to the chairman was, did the committee make a summary from the building committee that said, we picked Peck and here's why? Like, did you guys release a final report from the building committee that said, you know, after all these meetings and all this exhaustive research and discussion and dialogue, here's our findings and here's the XYZ that you could give the city council?
So we have minutes from all of our meetings that we can certainly share with you, because those have to then be also submitted to the MSBA.
Okay.
So we can certainly submit you our minutes once they're approved at our next meeting, of course, because they were just discussed at a previous meeting. We would have met last Thursday, but being 3 Kings Day, we're meeting this Thursday.
Okay.
So we can certainly present that to you, but, you know, there's a lot of points of discussion. The video's also recorded, I'm pretty sure. You could watch it as
Yeah.
well.
Realistically, I'm not gonna go through all that.
I know. So
But if you
in the
could even
short of
do a
it, so-
two-page summary,
It was a really good discussion. Like Aaron kept trying to bring us back on track of our time for our agenda, and we all agreed that it was really important to get the discussion talked about. One of the things that propelled the discussion was knowing that the agreement with the city for the Chestnut Street site was going to end. Some of the design schematics of the Chestnut Street site are a little bit more tricky. It's such a small, tight site, so figuring out parking and community spaces, like, you know, ball fields and things like that. But ultimately, also, if it ends up being at Chestnut, the city is going to be left with Peck to decide what to do with Peck, because, and let's say, like, either way, Peck will come offline as far as the school district is concerned, because it's just so inefficient to run. And the MSBA has made it very clear that they will not give us a penny to renovate Peck in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And Peck needs major work.
and I'm not looking to rehash all that or even your analysis, but if somebody could just say from the bill, I don't know, an executive summary or something that says, we decided to do X and here's why. You know, that would be helpful for us, for the record, for us to, because now it's sort of, you've moved beyond the school building committee stage, right, to get this, and now it's sort of go do it stage, right? And you guys are gonna monitor
Like I
this.
said, we could provide you with the minutes.
Okay.
I don't know.
All
if
right,
we
I'll
have an
review the minutes.
executive summary,
Kevin, I can
unless
write
Josh
something
wanted
for
to
you.
write one.
No worries.
I think the minutes and a response is
All right.
good, but please include, Anthony, you talked about it. We know there'll be additional cost if Chestnut gets back on. And just, if you could just, show us what additional costs, what they would look like.
Right,
Just
we would
so-
have to, so like, we asked the OPM and designer to give us a cost if we were looking at the one site and that, we'd have to go back to them and ask them, what if we asked you to explore an additional site? It's not something that I'd be able to just come up with, and on the model school, I can provide you with whatever information is on the MSBS website in terms of, but I don't think that we're gonna be able to sit here and tell you before we need a vote, like how much money that would save, because we don't know until the designers go, they're selected, they take a look, and they look at the site and see what modifications need to be made to then determine what I wanna do and what I wanna commit to the Holyoke citizens and to you all is that I don't want anybody to be able to say like, hey, there was another cheaper option that you guys didn't even look at or
Right, no
discuss.
kidding.
I want to be able to say like, we looked at all of the other options, and this model school is another option that somebody could say, hey, why didn't you look at that? I want to be able to say, we looked at it and here's why we ruled it out, or we looked at it and it works great and it's going to save us some money. I'd hate to be in a position where we move forward and someone can say like, this was a real viable option that we didn't even look at.
I just want to make sure that Anthony's point wasn't missed and that the feasibility study would potentially be more expensive if we have the designer and OP study both sites. I
Right.
just want to make sure that.
Right, and I know dollar figures are moving targets in this process. I mean, just sitting up here, you've got people that have sat on building committees, police stations.
It added $290,000.
We get it, and what you did, we get. We understand why you do it the way you do it, and we understand it's still a moving target. But we're trying to anticipate not as much this vote, which is important, but the next vote, which is much more important. I got a couple of hands up. I just want to summarize the questions. Will, you had a couple points. One was site, which I think we just covered. Is there anything else that you wanted to include in answers coming?
I think Councilor Jordan's questions were.
Okay. And Counselor Bacon, you talked a couple things, and I don't know answers that you're looking for.
Right, and so this is a new one based on what I just heard. What I'm interested in knowing is in the new design and feasibility. In the last proposals, there were some fairly significant design options that were not reimbursable under education. And so when we're trying to analyze the cost savings options, I want to make sure we're focused on those things. And that if we need other community services for our students, that we look to partnerships and collaborations with our community providers who are very collaborative in every instance that I've seen, rather than adding to the cost of building a new school. So I would like to see that addressed, and in particular as it relates to the model school. Okay, so I would be interested in understanding that more.
I think the second one that you were talking about, Aaron, was the parent room
Parent
center.
Community Center, yeah.
Center, that was gonna be Chestnut.
So-
And the other one was gonna be, PEC was gonna be the first one,
Right.
but,
That's also another one, Chairman McGivern, that, between now and before we're even invited into feasibility, we won't know. I mean,
Well,
we haven't
except
worked
that-
with our OPM or our designer to say, okay, what if we took that out of the design? Right now, we haven't even been invited to the next phase of the process.
Except that through the chair, if I
That's right.
may. We do know from our past experience what we had sought and what the impact was. So we do have some historical data that informs us. We don't have to wait for everything because we've been to this rodeo once. And so I would like to make sure that we are using the information that we learned in doing this review as we're working to go forward.
Yep.
Thank you.
okay, in terms of questions, I think we covered what we heard this evening. In terms of wrap-up, Counselor Anderson Burgos, briefly?
Very briefly, thank you. Listen, I sat here and everyone here brought up good points, very good points, things to contemplate, think about. And there's a lot of passion, you can tell from both sides. Everyone has passion about this and seeing it happen. My concern is that we get way too ahead of ourselves and we at least be mindful and that we think about if anyone loses, it's going to be the children of the city. And I believe in this body and I believe in this process and I believe that every single one of us can make this happen. And passion aside, bring everything forward. And if we work together, this can happen. I'm willing to work with all of you, and I just wanted to state that as simply as an observation. As I sat here and listened to everyone talk, I could hear the passion. I understand every single one of you. I really do. But let's not fail the children. Let's not do that. Thank you.
Online to our city treasurer and our auditor, we know you've been here for a good reason. Is there any points or questions that you haven't heard that you'd like to bring up to this committee?
I do not have any questions.
Thank you, Tanya. That was our auditor. And is there any other comments from the committee, from the mayor?
Well, I was just going to say, because I know the point number 2 in Councilor Jourdain's question, since Tanya is on, because Tanya, so the councilor is looking for a legal binding commitment to be sure that the school district will commit the $500,000. I'm just thinking Mass General Law, municipal finance, appropriation. I'm under the impression that you can't make a legal binding commitment to that level because of municipal finance and how we operate here. I think the letter of support and the willingness and the desire, but to make an actual concrete, confirmed, no other questions about it commitment, is that possible?
I mean, that's more of a question for the legal department, but I would say yes, that we can. If it's over 3 years, it would have to run through the city council, just like any contract that we sign.
The answer we got the last time was similar to the 3-year problem about how binding out the mandate can be.
Yeah.
But Anthony, if I remember, and I think Dr. Zreich, worked with Commissioner Riley, and we got a very important letter from Commissioner Riley that said exactly the way you described you were going to do it over the period of time.
Yeah.
And I think, Mayor, that might be what we're looking for,
I
is
think
just
so.
bring it up to time, get a new date on it and, revisit it.
Well, that letter from the commissioner or something similar to that too, it's good with me. I just wasn't sure if that's like a legal binding.
I can only speak for myself and not for anyone else, but.
'Cause everything's always subject to
We went through the same thing the
appropriation,
first
as you
go-around,
know.
and
Yeah.
that seemed to satisfy everybody when the commissioner wrote that letter.
Yeah, from DESI, making sure that the money is here for the life of this bond if we were to do this,
Any other comments from the committee? Any other comments from anyone?
Nope. I make a motion to table, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made.
Pending our getting answers to all these questions, and we'll take it up again soon.
Motion is made and seconded?
Second.
Seconded to table. We don't discuss that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's on the table. We are going to work as quickly as possible, look for some feedback. And we will keep this on the table and keep those dates in mind. But thank you, everyone. Mayor,
Very helpful, yeah.
Superintendent, Vice Chair, School Committee, David, Will for filling 2 roles this evening, But we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate the transparency. And we learned a lot this evening.
What's that, the Apple Watch?
Well, I'm going to stop there. Stuff going back to prior years, right? Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We have one more item.
The motion to take item number 4 off the table for discussion.
Motion made, seconded, to take item 4 off the table, which is that there being hereby is appropriated by transfer in fiscal 2022, $9,800 from assistant auditor, $6,380 from head clerk, with a total of $16,180 to IRS penalties. On the motion to take off the table, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. This is a first for me, Counselor Anderson Burgos. So I take it it's a first for you, but we have a few people with us this evening. I think the mayor's with us. Anthony might be learning, I'm sorry, Joshua might be learning what a lot of us are gonna learn this evening. Our auditor is with us to explain this to us and get the answers to any questions we might have. Tanya, could you just walk us through this and pass the baton to anyone you wish that can help us?
So I'm actually going to pass that on to Kate Jakowski because she has the most information about what the IRS penalties are. But I can say that the transfers from my department are from open positions. One was open at the beginning of the year, so we did not need that funding. And I still have one position that is open, which is the head clerk position. So that's available funding from that line. And I'm going to let her speak to the IRS penalty.
And on those two lines, even if we use this $16,180 and those positions are filled for the rest of the year, you'll have enough money to pay for those two individuals, right?
Correct.
Okay. And Katie, I didn't want to just throw you under the bus, but I kind of thought that's why you were here. Our city treasurer, Katie Jakowski.
Thanks, Joe. So what this is, about 2 months into my acting term as treasurer this calendar year, or last calendar year, I guess now, we're in a new calendar year. I got a letter from the IRS saying that they were penalizing us for actually $138,000 for the retirement board tax filings from 2020. So I took 3 days to actually get a hold of the IRS and talk this through, and it turned out that it only needed to be $18,000 because what happened was the July 2020 payroll taxes for the retirement board, for whatever reason, and the reason I do not know because I was not there at this point, did not get paid until 2 weeks later. So the IRS is penalizing us the $18,000 for not paying it quick enough. And so that's what this is. And I originally in August of 2021 paid it out of the retirement board funds. And now because I was waiting to find where in the general fund budget I could find the money to, then now I'm looking to reimburse them because it's not technically their fault, it's our fault.
And Katie, can you just a little bit more, what taxes are we, it's employee taxes, correct? Retired employee taxes? You broke up a little.
Federal income tax.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little.
It's for federal income tax.
Okay, is the city portion of federal income tax, or what came out of the retired employees check itself?
Correct. It's a retiree's income tax.
Okay, and that means it wasn't city money. It was retirees' money that should have gone to the IRS more timely.
Correct.
Okay, I'm asking, but I'm kind of just making sure I heard you correctly, which you said it perfect. Questions from the committee?
I have questions.
Councilor Jordan.
Katie, first thing you said was that it was a payroll tax issue. I just want to clarify, payroll taxes for FICA, did you mean it was for withholding that the retirees have, that they put set-asides for federal income tax purposes on their retirement checks?
Correct.
Okay. So what, in your opinion, was the reason that this happened? Because that should be automatic. I mean, people fill out a IRS form with the office, and this just goes on automatically month after month after month, and I believe these individuals are paid monthly. This was a 1 month miss?
Correct. So like the last day of every month is when the retirees receive their paycheck. And that's automatically withheld. You're correct there. But then it's the treasurer's job to take the amount that was withheld and physically go online and pay the federal government. And that's supposed to happen within like 3 business days of the taxes being withheld. And for whatever reason, in the July 2020 didn't get paid until August 11th, and so that's what they're penalizing us for.
Okay. So whose job is it to make sure that, as the employee, I'm assuming in your office you have various people assigned to actually go in and make these transfers and to pay these things online. So, what happened? Was there somebody on vacation? Like, do you have somebody designated to make all these payments on a monthly basis, and somebody was asleep at the switch, or like what happened?
I don't know. I can't answer that question because I wasn't physically in the office in 2020. But it is technically, for the retirement board at least, it's the treasurer's job, and I'm the one that does it every month now that I'm in the position, because I get a stipend from the retirement board to deal with their finances.
Okay. So is the staff person in your office, was that person working for us in July of 2020? Job was this? Or did you reach out to Sandy to figure out to reverse engineer this, to figure out what happened?
Yep, I did talk to Sandy. It was Sandy's job at the time, and she did not recall what happened. In the retirement ledger, there was a note saying that it should have been paid on August 3rd, but for whatever reason, it didn't clear till August 11th. And so that's just the only piece. I honestly have no idea, and Sandy didn't recall why it would have been paid 2 weeks late.
Whose job is it of the employees in your office? I don't need a name, but perhaps a title. Do you have someone that's designated to go in? Like, everybody clearly knows their responsibilities so that it's not oh, no, it's her job. No, it's his job. Does everybody know what they're supposed to do in these, like, is there clear delineation of duties in the office?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And like I said, specifically for the retirement board, they have their own federal tax ID. This particular job falls on the treasurer position itself.
So is it you that physically goes in and makes these payments online, or is it one of your staff people?
It's me.
You. Okay. So since you weren't there, then presumably this was Sandy doing this then at that time.
Correct.
Okay. And for whatever reason, Sandy forgot or whatever. And she doesn't, you said you spoke to her and she didn't recall.
Correct.
Okay. So I wanted to ask the question, and why I'm going to ask this next question is because there's some history here. Did you ask the IRS if they would give you a one-time forgiveness for this $18,000, considering that it's a mistake and this pound of flesh comes out of the taxpayer of Holyoke's pocket? And, is there any way around the 18 grand? Did you ask them?
It took me 3 days to get a hold of them over the summer. But yeah, the original letter, like I said, was for $138,000. And I worked with them and tried to send as much information as I could. And that's how we got it down to the $18,000.
Well, I think maybe part of the problem is, have you ever had an opportunity to read the state auditor's report about your department, the treasurer's? Again, all of this way before you. But did you ever have an opportunity to review some of the inspector general's recommendations for that office? And this was done approximately 10 or 12 years ago. that they had made a series of recommendations and a series of findings about the Hoyo Treasurer's Office. Have you ever had an opportunity to review that report?
I think I might have in passing one time, but certainly not thoroughly.
Well, one of the findings from the prior was that we got into a jam with the IRS before. And it was because we weren't doing the proper withholdings and payments for a period of years. Actually, it was discovered at one point where on a whole number of things weren't getting paid. And that's probably one, you go to them and you say, gee, we made a mistake. Well, you've made mistakes before. And that's probably why our name isn't too great down there. It's too bad that stuff like this happens, because this is really, a totally unnecessary expense. I don't see how we have any choice but to pay it, unfortunately. But, it just goes to show how important your office is, and what you guys do there has definite ramifications on the whole city. So, thank you for bringing it to our attention, and I guess you've talked it down as much as you can. So there we're at.
Okay, thank you. I think you've significantly talked it down, and I understand. I was told I can't say anything but nice things about the MSBA, and I don't have to be told to say anything but nice things about the IRS. But I appreciate your explanation, and I think it's something, if you've talked it down that much, I think it's something we have to pay and not cut our losses, but face the consequences. And I don't have to ask. I know you've taken the steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. Is there any other discussion? Councilor Tallman, and then online, can I get Councilor Tallman, then Councilor Israel Rivera? Hang on a minute, Izzy.
Yeah, just real briefly, I'm just looking at the numbers here. I hear the number is 18,000, but it's got 16,000 on the transfer. So is it 16,000?
No, so it is 18,000, but Tanya was nice enough to find within her budget the 16,000 that I need your approval to transfer, and the rest I have in my budget.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Israel Rivera.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I just wanted to say thank you to Katie for shrinking the debt from 138 to 18,000. That's a lot. That's a big, significant shrink in what we had to pay. And I want to echo kind of what Jourdain said, where it's unfortunate that we do have to waste. And can I say waste, because it's 18 grand that we technically don't have to fix a situation, but it has to be done. But thank you again, and thank you, Katie.
And Izzy, I just want to know how much you're paying your assistant there? Oh, he disappeared in that one, huh?
That wasn't me, that was her. She pressed the button.
Oh, she shut you out, huh?
Yeah. That's why I've been off the camera, because I know she's going to go crazy if I go on.
We've been there, don't worry.
All right.
Any further discussion?
Thank you, guys.
Any further discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
Motion made second to approve the transfer. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Before the motion to adjourn, we're finding out, new committee schedules and new needs of different committees. But with the holiday next week and with whatever's coming in from the full city council, would the 31st be okay for everybody?
Yeah, I think
It
that's
won't
good
be
for
a
me,
big
yeah.
agenda, but it'll be, the only problem with the 31st, I try to avoid them, but it's the Monday before the February 1st meeting. But we're gonna try to stick on Mondays.
6:30.
When we can't get a Monday, sometimes we have to try to get a Wednesday. But 6:30 is my decision, because there's at least two people that 6 o'clock is a problem. Okay, so 6:30.
The mayor, I think, wanted to say something.
Mayor?
I just had an update on something, but if I can add.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so I want to let the finance committee know that we just kicked off today our first monthly finance team meetings between our financial departments, and we've brought on to participate in those meetings, mostly for them to understand our need and see how they can help us, some consultants, to, offer some assistance in how we navigate the deficiencies, mostly those identified in the audit reports that Jourdain had made reference to. And I wanted to offer a seat at the table to, I know originally I was thinking to chair the finance committee, but it's going to be every second Tuesday via Zoom, I think at 9 or 10. What did I say, Peter? 9
o'clock.
9 o'clock a.m. So if not the chairman, maybe someone who can jump in that.
And we appreciate that. I can speak for the whole city council for that. To get a representative of the city council, we need to go through the president. Okay, I'm not saying formal, but we need Todd to appoint, whether it's someone on this committee or someone that's available, sometimes is what it comes down to during the day, but we will find someone to, to represent the council and thus would represent all of us.
Right, so when I came in a month and a half ago or so, I did have this discussion with the council president at that time, and we were waiting for you guys to reorganize. He's going to be involved too as the council president. So the idea was to find a council president, but a member of the finance committee, so that as we go forward with, because the big thing that we're going to talk about is, I'm to a point now where I'm concluding there's a great deal of catch-up work that's necessary, and that's going to be an investment in itself outside from whatever we budget for day-to-day operations in our finance departments, particularly in the treasurer's office. So it'd be great to have, and if it's just the council president, that's fine, but a member that.
No, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
Yeah.
We just need the council president to appoint one of us.
Yeah.
Oh, to appoint one of you.
Yeah,
guys.
we can't choose ourselves.
Right.
Well, is there anyone that's
any one of us
interested?
could volunteer, and you could appoint us, but then we wouldn't be representing the body as a whole.
council, yeah.
When we get the president to say, yes, Kevin, yes, Joe, yes, Will, Peter, whoever, there's certain people on this committee that are retired, and there's certain people on this committee who are not retired.
Yep.
We'll find someone, is what I'm trying to say, but we have to get Todd to give us the stamp of approval. Yeah.
So either way, yeah, so ideally what we would do is recognize what strategies need to be in play to achieve the objectives ahead around closing the gaps on these deficiencies. And so I'm hoping that by doing this, it'll establish that level of cross-coordination and collaboration and understanding of what needs to be done so that we can execute and go forward with not just the catch-up, but also some of the discussions, hopefully, is, what new systems, policies, and procedures can we set up so that we're strengthening operations and not necessarily going backwards. And so that's the idea. I'm hoping that a member of this committee, through Todd, through council president, would participate.
I think it's fantastic, and I said this to you once, Mayor Josh, it's very important, and I agree that a member of this committee would be the perfect person to choose, and we'll work on that. 9 o'clock Zoom on what Tuesday?
Second Tuesday.
Second Tuesday, okay. All right, thank you. Seriously, thank you. It's important. And thank you for being here tonight. I can't remember the last time we had a mayor for the entire finance committee.
Well, Peter said, Councilor Thomas said the same thing. I was like, well, Mayor Murphy set the bar, so I gotta keep up.
I wanted to tell Anthony, he's the first superintendent, even though he's a receiver, the first superintendent, I think, in 20 years that's from Hoyo. And that speaks for itself. That's important. All right, we'll get that favorite motion.
Motion adjourned.
Motion made second to adjourn. Let's not debate it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned.